Okay, so yes, it's all good. It's three, two, one, our usual way, the way we host our virtual event sessions. But today is going to be different because this is going to be the first exclusive session which we are doing for CPaaS. And this is the series is actually called as VideoVerse on how we are going to explore the potential of CPaaS. And I'm so delighted to have Rob Kruger, who is the founding partner of CPaaS Acceleration Alliance with us today, and where we are going to discuss all about CPaaS. I'm sure 30 minutes is going to be a real less time for us, but we'll try to at least cover the important ones. And don't worry, we'll definitely have follow-up sessions on the same subject. Welcome all, and over to you, Rob. Why don't you introduce yourself and tell us about the passion which you bring into the.
Okay, thank you, Shika. Thanks for inviting me on the show. It's really excited to be. I'm really excited to talk about CPaaS for only half an hour, because there's so much to say. So my name is Rob Curver. I'm located. I live in Amsterdam, in the Netherlands, and I'm the founding partner of the CPaaS Acceleration Alliance. And before I did that, and I'll tell in a little bit what we do at the Alliance, of course. But my background is in cloud communications for almost 20 years. So I was the founder a long time ago of a hosted voice provider in the region. And then for the past 10 years, I've worked a lot with telcos and carriers and large enterprises on the use of cloud communications and UC as a service and contact centers. And the last couple of years, more and more on CPaaS. And the interesting thing with CPaaS, which is communication platform as a service, right? And we all know the term CPaaS, but nobody really knows what CPaaS means or is, because it's so many things to so many different people, right? For some people, CPaaS is messaging and SMS and messaging, but I like to think as CPaaS as a much broader category, really all sorts of communication building blocks, really, that can be used by developers to embed into applications. And we'll focus a little bit more on video later in this session, because that's, of course, a very important use case these days. But there's also voice, and there is nowadays AI and IoT, etc. And what we do with the CPaaS Acceleration Alliance, the reason we started that last year really, is to bring all the players in the industry together to learn what it is, what's possible, to educate the market on the possibilities. Because it's so interesting, if you talk to the vendors, if you talk to the people that have solutions in CPaaS and the platforms, there's so much possible. And then if you talk to enterprises, to businesses that could use some sort of application of CPaaS, they typically don't know what's possible, right? Because it's a strange technical term. Nobody wakes up in the morning and thinks, oh, I need some more CPaaS in my life. But it's so important, I think, in many areas, what's possible by using the communication capabilities that are now open and accessible. You can build so many new applications or better applications and new use cases, and it has the potential to transform really our digital experience. And that's a big thing, of course, nowadays. And certainly after the COVID years of lockdown, we're looking at totally different ways to communicate online. And this whole idea of embedding the communications into your work stream or the way you live has become very important. So at the Alliance, we're now at 50 members, large and small, and analysts. We bring the media, the analysts, the large providers of the platforms together. I hope you guys will join very shortly as well. We're doing online sessions. We're doing events. We're doing a big event in Amsterdam in September. Everybody's very welcome to attend. And really the purpose is to talk about CPaaS, to show what's possible, to look at use cases, and to discuss also, let's say, the challenges in the industry that need to be overcome to get more adoption and more awareness of the possibilities. At the end of the day, it's all about the users and about the use cases and the showcases and bringing that to market. So I'm really excited that we have that platform now that's growing really fast, because we see that there's so much interest. So I'm really glad also that you're doing this session about CPaaS and you're going to do follow-up sessions It's just such an exciting space.
Yep, same for us, Rob. And then it's such a delight to hear about the passion for this particular subject coming from you. And to be honest, when we were doing our research as well, that which are the alliances or which are the communities which are totally focused on CPaaS, trust me, I did not find many. And then there were many groups, but then of course the active participation from the users or the kind of research insights which we are looking for this particular industry, that was indeed missing. Because I'm sure you would also agree and our audience would also agree that there is so much conversations happening about SaaS. You will find a lot of communities, a lot of active events, or so many other things happening for SaaS. But when we talk about CPaaS as the subject, it's hard to find. But I think
Yeah,
that's also the challenge, right? How to educate
yeah,
the market and bring the hidden potential at the
exactly.
forefront.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, for a long time, of course, CPaaS started pretty small, right? And there were some big players that did the messaging and some very standard use case that we all know, the messaging, the one-time passwords. Every CPaaS platform had Uber and Facebook as their biggest customer for a long time, but it was a very small market in a sense. What we're projecting now, we just did launched a report on the state of CPaaS, where we look a little bit broader. So we look at all the various bits and pieces of CPaaS, which also includes telco APIs that are coming up to manage the 5G networks and IoT. I mentioned AI is coming up as part of the communication mix. So if you combine all of that, we're projecting that the total market of CPaaS is going to grow from 15 billion that it is today to 100 billion by the end of this decade. So now we're talking about a huge market with lots of opportunities, lots of possibilities. Um, and you're right, there are not that many CPaaS, or there really aren't any CPaaS dedicated platforms or events so far. CPaaS has always been maybe an hour at a big event, right? That's somebody else's show. And we're really focusing on it. Dedicated alliance. The members talk about nothing else than CPaaS. And we'll have the first ever really CPaaS focused event, as I said, in Amsterdam in September. So then we have 2 or 3 days really talking about CPaaS from all the different angles. So yeah, it's there's a lot happening, and can't wait to see what's going to be developed over the next couple of years, really, because that's the key point.
Exactly, Rob. And then we actually, I think, started on a good note when we are talking about the challenges, because my conversation with you, of course, is going to start from the challenges and what are the kind of opportunities which CPaaS vendors they actually bring it out. So, talking about the challenges, Rob, what are the challenges which are being faced by the users, when understanding the opportunities which are provided by the CPaaS? Is it their ignorance, or is it like they have not understood the potential? What do you think? What is your perspective?
Well, I think that's a really good question, and this is the big issue in this industry, right? Because CPaaS is very flexible. It's a platform, and everything is possible. And traditionally, what sort of happened was that the APIs and the SDKs and all the technology was made available. And then, if you have millions of developers, then people may start to develop things. But really, the connection to the user is so important. And if the users don't understand the capabilities and the possibilities of these new technical platforms, there's a real disconnect between those two. So if the users don't know that maybe they have problems that could be solved by this new CPaaS technology, and the CPaaS developers don't really know what problems need to be solved in the world, we need to bridge that gap. And I think there's a number of ways that can be done. I think there's a large role for the vendors and also for the channel partners, like telecom operators, mobile network operators. They have the reach to the customers, to the enterprises, and to the end users, and they can also play a role in, let's say, trying, co-creating use cases that make sense for their customer base. right? So one of the things that we do with the Alliance is at events we organize CPaaS showcase challenges, which is a 10-minute Shark Tank kind of approach where startups or teams can present the new things that they've built on CPaaS. And just recently, in one of these sessions, we had a company from the US that demonstrated how their video API could be used for poker games. Now, I don't know if you thought about it. I wasn't thinking about it, but they found that the market for online game with video, people playing poker in the middle of the night, was a huge market. So they found that they could use their technology to, of course, really easily add the video to the game. And then they started to develop that market, sell it, and they found the user base, the customer base. But I think that not many CPaaS platform vendors started out by thinking, let's get into the poker game business. Another really interesting vertical, I think, is healthcare. And we're starting to see that during the COVID years, of course. I mean, we need remote healthcare because, well, we had the COVID situation for a long time. And we also see now that it makes sense that a lot of things can be done at a distance. It's cheaper, it's more effective. It's also easier for the patients in many cases. But so, and using the video API to make that connection, of course, everybody sort of now understands, right? We're all used to Teams and Zoom and all these platforms all the time. But embedding it into the application at the hospital for the doctor and connecting it to all the business processes and making sure that all the regulatory constraints are met and the security and the privacy and all those things. I mean, that's different. That's different for a hospital than for a poker game. So you need people that understand that business, that vertical, those applications, the way these people want to work, how the workflows are, to embed the technology. So the thing with CPaaS is it's not the solution, right? It's only a building block, and you need that whole channel with system integrators, developers, startups, but also enterprises, and I think also the telcos play a role here. They need to bridge that gap, and they need to all co-create these solutions. We need to bring the technology and the user really together, experiment, and then see what works and what doesn't work. And that's just going to take time.
Yes, definitely, Rob. And trust me, the kind of use cases which you just mentioned about and having a kind of showcase, I believe that's the key part. That, yeah, we have the technology, but how are we going to use that? Because unless and until, I think it's a human tendency, right? Unless and until we don't see that what are the capabilities and how it can
Exactly.
be done in a practical aspect, then I believe the challenges which we are discussing right now, they're just going to vanish away.
Yeah.
And for healthcare, of course, we know about the use case, in fact, for financial services as well. But online games, I think that's something exemplary. I mean, trust me, I'm going to do more research, or probably we need to have a dedicated session, because I'm sure all the gamers will be really excited to see what is the kind of potential which is being brought in.
Yeah. And it's interesting to think of gaming, right? Because the gaming industry is larger than the movie industry. And I think if you're not in the gaming industry, I guess it looks like it's young people just doing crazy stuff. But it's a very interesting market, and there's a lot of people that can be helped there, and new applications and new use cases and new business models can be explored, and that's the name of the game. Which also, I mean, immediately connects. I mean, gaming, of course, is also a very interesting use case or vertical domain for anything related to 5G. All the network APIs, right? The monetization of 5G gaming is. So here's 2 tips for you, free of charge: gaming for video and for network APIs. But this is exactly. I mean, if you don't see the example, if you don't see what's possible, it's all very abstract. And I think that's the phase where we're in now. We need to look at these. And you mentioned the financial markets. That's another very interesting market, of course. And it's interesting that, in the sense also that there's let's say, a different level of maybe privacy and their regulatory constraints, right? So not everybody wants to do their financial conversations or transactions on Microsoft Teams or Zoom or one of the other big solutions. So this is an area where you can look at embedding video through an API in the special workflow, combine it, for example, with the processing of the appointment. I know there's a Dutch startup that became very quickly very big with exactly this. They took, because you can say video API, WebRTC has been around for a couple of years. Everybody can take WebRTC and just build a video thing. But the point is, that's not the product. That's not the end product. That's just a little bit of the technology. You need to make sure it works, it's secure, you have the firewalls, you have all the technical issues. But then also the work really starts because you need to embed it into an application. And if you think about a financial conversation with your bank about something, there's also the whole process around it. You need to book an appointment, it needs to be scheduled, you have the confirmation, if things are delayed. I mean, you have to handle all of these things around it, and then things have to be logged, maybe a recording must be kept, maybe a transcript. So you need to make that flow, let's say 100% right, otherwise it's just not going to work. I think that's the key point with CPaaS and with customer experience. The trick is not to build something that kind of works, the trick is to build something that's really compelling, very easy to use, a pleasure to use, really. The idea is for healthcare that an online healthcare session is more, I was going to say more fun, but of course it's never fun to have those discussions, but it's easier and it's more comfortable to do it online than to go into a hospital or a doctor's office to have the real visit. Once you get to that point, then we'll see that the users will pick up and people will just start to use it and expect it and find it normal. And then very quickly, I think it goes from limited use to big use. On the healthcare, I have another example that I worked with in the Netherlands a couple of years ago, where a startup was developing an app for the healthcare, for the hospital to engage, to work with the patients. And they had built something with, let's say, an over-the-top platform, one of the big players. And then engaging with the hospitals, they found that there was really some concern about the provider and the platform and how secure it is. So they came to KPN, the incumbent telco. Not because they had the best video API, but because as a vendor, as a partner, they're more reliable and trustworthy. And I think that's the other part of this. It's not just the technology, it's also how can you work with partners in this ecosystem to develop the solutions, to try things out, to work together, to test, to have the regulatory, all those constraints met, because you need to fine tune it. And that's going to take multiple parties working together with the domain knowledge and the knowledge of the industry, but also knowledge of the technology and where things are going to make things perfect.
Exactly, Rob. Actually, I had saved one of the use case for my next session because we have a panel discussion coming up on the use cases for the banking industry. But I'm really compelled to share that because we were just talking about the financial industry and of course the security part which you just mentioned. Recently I was applying for one of the services offered by a bank, and when they told me that, hey, we are going to complete this through video KYC. And then, of course, me being into this particular field, I was like, okay, let me try that, how it's going to happen. And I did that. And it took me, of course, within a couple of seconds, it took me to the bank's platform. And of course, the security part and, those things came into my mind. And the bank representative, he was like, no, ma'am, I'm actually from the bank. And I was actually prodding him. No, because there are so many scams are happening around these days. I don't trust you. So he was like, no, ma'am, please see my ID card. See, this is the platform. This is the URL. Everything is secure. Please don't worry. But then I just wanted to prod him further. So I was like, okay, so what exactly you're going to ask me for the verification? So he was asking me for the documents. But then I told him, see, that I'm into this particular industry. I just wanted to double check on the feature, how you guys are doing it. But then let me just come back. But he was a little worried that he's going to lose a customer. So he went on the compelling feature, ma'am, please, no, let's do it right now. It's just going to take a couple of minutes, or not even minutes, just fraction of seconds. But yeah, I think talking about the security aspect, yes, Rob, I think it does come into the picture, because the kind of environment, of course, wherein we are. So you are right that it's not only one player, but the ecosystem of partners wherein they come together. And very rightly you had quoted one of the example wherein the startup went to one of the telco player, wherein because they were enjoying a lot of reliability and trust into the market. I think that's again one of the other key as well. But yeah,
Yeah.
I think interesting discussions, and as I was sure that 30 minutes is going to be less. But moving further to the next set, Rob, because I have got some interesting questions from the audience as well. So the next one is, Rob, for you, that we have so many CPaaS vendors in the market, and of course, your recent report also highlights that. Then, how should buyers, the customers, should navigate with the CPaaS vendors? What are the things with which they should be actually looking for when they're shortlisting the vendors for implementing this technology, having this the entire workflow?
Yeah. Well, that's a really good question. And I think it depends. The answer is not black and white. It depends on the use case. It depends on the goals and the ambitions of the user, right? Really, what are you looking for? And I know, for example, there are some reports out there that really do a comparison of the larger CPaaS players, right? For example, IDC just released their MarketScape, which lists the top 23 providers that are out there, and it gives a one page with description of the features, this and that, the pros and cons, and then they get ranked. But I always think that, well, that's kind of interesting to see that ranking, right? And which one is the biggest and the best and this and that. It really depends on your requirements. And I think what you're looking for in many cases is not just the, let's say, the feature set, and how large they are, but also where are things located and hosted, right? Especially if you're not in North America or in Western Europe, that's something to take into account. The regulatory issues are important if you look globally as well, because different regions, different countries have different requirements. And it also goes back to the domain, the vertical, the industry sector that you're looking at, right? It's going to be very difficult for banks or healthcare or other regulated industries compared to just simple e-commerce. And I think that's where CPaaS started, right? With e-commerce, and it's fine. If 90% works, then it's good enough. But if as we move into the more complicated verticals, the rules of the game are changing and the requirements are changing. And I think finally what's also really, really important is to find a partner, a platform, a vendor that you can work with. Right? Not everybody, unless you have all the developers in-house, you don't need any support. But in many cases, you're looking for some support and guidance from your vendor about these more complicated issues. Again, not how to call the API, because they get that. But the other stuff, how are things working? What is the security? How can things be embedded perhaps in some of the more difficult platforms that are used on the customer side? So I think in many situations you're looking for some sort of co-creation model and a real partnership model, and not just the online platform that we've known for a while, right? That was great for this, I would say, the simpler APIs, and for the certainly for the large enterprises where there's a lot of developers that like to tinker and build stuff. But as we move, and that's one of the things in our report, the next big opportunity is really in small and medium enterprises, not the large enterprises. Now, many small and medium enterprises don't have a lot of developers in-house, or they don't have any developers in-house. So they're looking at platforms that are easy to use, low code, no code, where they can get support, where there's maybe a rich partner ecosystem that can help them. And again, all of these things are very, very different in different parts of the world. So you need to look locally. And I think reports like the IDC MarketScape are great because it gives first impression of what's out there, but it's certainly not the end. You need to look at your specific requirements in your part of the world, because, of course, I mean, we're now talking or addressing India much more, right? And it's a totally different world. With different players. What we find in the alliance is we have a couple of Indian members now that I had never heard of a year ago. And they're amazing companies. They're large companies. So that's one of the interesting things with CPaaS right now. Everybody knows Twilio and Vonage and Infobip, right? The big guys. But there's so many smaller players that are still very large, very professional, and very capable, and have a focus on different parts of the world. And I'm sure that Jio is one of them as well.
Thank you, Rob, for that. And yeah, we are bang on time. Though, of course, my list is pretty big, but then I'm going to reserve that for a follow-up session with you. But I would definitely like to take up at least two questions from the audience, Rob. One of the, you can say, question which has come is from a vendor side. Any tips you have for CPaaS vendors?
From what side? Sorry, from
Your
from a
tips?
vendor side.
Yeah, for vendors. Yep, for
Well, I think the vendors, again, as the use cases are becoming more complicated, right, and more rich, the vendors also need to look more at showing what's possible. Not just showing, let's say, the platform and the technical capabilities, but really going out there and meet the customers where they are, and also meet the channel partners in between. I think that's the general trend that we see in the industry right now, that everybody is working on that. We're looking at telcos as an important channel for CPaaS platforms to the market. And then another thing, I mean, no session is complete without this word, of course, AI. I mean, AI, large machine models, the generative AI things that we've seen in the last 6 months are just amazing. And I think they're going to be changing this whole industry, as many others as well, but also the CPaaS industry, because they're going to provide, through AI, we're going to see more easier ways to configure things, to program things, etc. So I think there's a lot of innovation coming at us, and that's a challenge for all the vendors as well.
Yep, rightly said that, Rob. And yep, as I was mentioning that, trust me, it was an amazing conversation. And definitely we can't have enough of this, because this is such a vast topic which we cannot cover in 30 minutes. And as I was mentioning to you and to our audience, that every month we are going to have an exclusive CPaaS session under the series called as VideoVerse. And before we go, definitely we would like to, you can say, show our audience the JioMeet CPaaS capability through a short video before we sign off today's session. So over to you, Ayushi, if you can play that video before we say the last words about this amazing session of today.
We have seen that in today's era, hybrid model has become the new norm, and the CPaaS has recorded 30% growth in past 5 years across the market. And it's been forecasted that by 2025, the growth of CPaaS will be at the rate of 30% CAGR. And it's also expected that 90% of the companies will adopt the CPaaS. It's how we can start with onboarding a CPaaS platform by creating a persona. That's a very initial step, which we have learned in the previous episodes. So today I'll be taking you to use cases of the CPaaS first, like before taking you to the onboarding onto the CPaaS, for you to understand what are the possible cases or the companies or the organizations are doing in this industry in the current time. So these are the some of the cases at present going in the market. There are multiple CPaaS providers available in the market, and each one of them will provide you different capabilities and offerings. So based on your requirements and needs, you can choose your CPaaS provider and onboard to one of them. So right now I'll be taking an example of a JioMeet, how you can onboard, what all things you can see, and how easily you can integrate your application by just going onboarding onto a CPaaS platform, and you will have all the capabilities onto your applications. You can connect with your friends, loved ones, colleagues, and get the hands-on experience of how an integrated CPaaS product looks like, how it feels, how they have customized it, and you can also get the experience of how it has enhanced the watching experiences.
Thank you, Ayushi, for that. And yes, if you would like to know more about JioMeet CPaaS capabilities, please do drop us a message, or we can connect on LinkedIn as well. So thank you, Rob. It was a delight to have you on today's first exclusive session. And we really look forward to our upcoming discussions and to explore CPaaS in the nutshell, of course, talking about different use cases as per the industry, and then also bringing on the people who are actually using it, whether they are the developers or the other teams as well, because of course it's not only from the developer side, but again how the customer success team is involved, how the marketing team is involved, and then it's not only about that it's just developed, but then how the use case is actually being perceived at the customer, and that is the key point. And there is one question which keeps on hopping in my mind, is that once that use case gets deployed, does the feedback goes back to the person who has completed the entire workflow or not? So on that note, I'm going to be ending the session here. It is the first part, and of course we're going to be picking up the thread on this holy grail, whether the feedback does get passed to the person who has created the workflow or not. Rob, thank you so much for your time today. It was lovely having you, and we look forward to our upcoming discussions, Rob.
Great. Thank you for having me, and good luck with the rest of the session.
Yeah, thank you. Good day. Bye.
Bye-bye.